Good evening. As I traditionally say to you as we usher in the tail end of the Chumash, that in unison Klal Yisrael will stand up and say and proclaim at the end of Behar-Bechukosai, Chazak, Chazak, v'nis chazek, and Klal Yisrael should be able to strengthen themselves from within and from without in every which way, because not only every day do they need it, but we all need it together with Klal Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael and B'chol Makom Shaheim every second. I want to open with a Rokeach. Rokeach was a Rishon who lived around 800 years ago, and he said that if you look at the beginning of Bechukosai, because this week is a double parsha, Behar and Bechukosai, you look at the beginning of Bechukosai from the first word im up until the word komemius, which is a number of psukim, you will find there is no letter samach. And he says, why is there no samach? Because he explained that there are 60 samach is b'gematria, numerically 60. And there is no samach in all of those words to tell you that those psukim at the beginning of Bechukosai are a condition. Im Bechukosai telechu, if you do this and this and this, then v'nosati geshmechem be'itam v'nosna haaretz yevula, that all of these things that are brachos for Klal Yisrael will happen im Bechukosai telechu. But if not, chas v'shalom, then the brachos don't come. But there's an exception, says the Rokeach, and that is Birchas Kohanim. That when the Kohen goes up and duchens, and he gives the brachos to Klal Yisrael, the Yevarechacha, the Yoah Hashem Panav Elecha V'chuneka, and Yisa Hashem Panav Elecha V'yosem L'cho Shalom, all of these brachos, there is no condition. So even though in our psukim in Bechukosai it tells you in Bechukosai, if you keep it, then it's going to be great. But if you don't, it's not going to be so great. The exception is when you get the brachos from the Kohanim, whether you're great or not, whether you're doing what you're supposed to be doing or not, the brachos saturate each and every yid unconditionally. And that's the reason that there are exactly 60 letters in those three psukim of Birchas Kohanim. And that's why there is no samach in all of these psukim, to underscore that it's not under this umbrella of condition and not condition. It's unconditional. So says the Heilige Rokeach. Now, in the beginning of the Sedra, the pasuk says, "V'nosna haaretz pirya," that you'll keep the Torah, the land is going to give its fruit. Many of the Meforshim are curious. Why does it say pirya and not peiros? That it'll give its fruit out, that you'll have delicious, ripe, luscious fruit to enjoy. But it says pirya, its fruit. Because the Medrash Rabbah says that when the world was first created, before the chet of Adam HaRishon, the sin of Adam, that the barks of the tree produced in and of itself fruit, and every tree, everything in the fields produced fruit. It was a different world in the realm of fruit, and that it came out full, beautiful fruits in each and every way that anything was linked to a plant. It was the chait of Adam Arishon that stopped this whole process. He had to plant a tree, and there's a bark, and there's parts of it that have no fruit bearing to it, only the top, and it's a different panorama in the fruit realm of what it used to be. But we refer, the pasuk refers to its original state, that we have to now wait for Mashiach and the Geula Shlema to come to the world, and it will revert back to the state of what it was, and we'll get it back, but it won't come now until there's the Geula Shlema, and that we will be able to enjoy the royalty and the dignity of the original state of the fruit kingdom. Now, one of the psukim at the beginning is V'nasati shalom ba'oretz, that I will give shalom. Now, when we think of shalom, we're a little bit distant. We think, yeah, it's a nice concept, there should be peacefulness, people should get along with each other. Or, if we go a step further, the dimension of war. I mean, look at today in Eretz Israel. There are beautiful young boys, 20, 21 years old, who have not lived their lives. And they're being killed, Nebuch. It was hundreds the last time that I asked, like 800 that had died. Maybe it's over 1,000 already. Because every day someone falls in the world of war. And these boys never had a chance. They were Mekadesh Shem Shemayim to save other Yidden's lives and to be able to be an asset to Klal Yisrael, that all of these boys will be of the first to jump up by Tchias HaMesim and to participate in all of the beautiful activity and the joyfulness of Tchias HaMesim, as everybody will enjoy. But when we say V'nasati shalom ba'aretz, and we have real kavanah, and we do something to be able to enhance the lives, you know, as I always say to you, the only mitzvah that it says, Tatzil mimoves, saves from death, is tzedakah and mevi geula. There's no other mitzvah that says that. So when a person takes a dollar bill and gives tzedakah, have the kavanah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu keeps his own Torah, and if in the Torah and Chazal say that tzedakah is tatzil mimaves, that the schus of that tzedakah should save another boy, another child, another family from the Rishoim, and maintain the shalom, and they should remain alive. Now, that is the reason that three of the most important things that we do and say, number one, Shemona Esrei, the last bracha is shalom. Sim shalom or shalom rov. But after we've said everything else about Mashiach, Tzemach David Avdecha, all the beautiful things embodied in the text of Shemona Esrei, the thing that we leave with is the inyan of Shalom. The segula for Parnasa is benching. As it says in Kabbalah Svarim, that when you look in and you see the words as you say them, that is the biggest segula for Parnasa. As you bench and say Hazon Es Ha'olam. Now, most people know benching by heart, but you don't get the segula if you do it by heart. You have to be looking at the Tzuras Ha'oisius. What is in benching? The last line of benching, Hashem oz li'amo yitein, Hashem yivarech es amo v'shalom. And we conclude duchening with the power of all those powerful brachos, v'yosem l'cha shalom. And that's why I've told you that Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid stopped everyone from duchening in Chutz La'aretz. Not everyone, because Sfardim still do it, and in their shuls they have duchening Birchas Kohanim every day, but Klal Yisrael, the Ashkenazim, don't say it. And he explained, because the bracha is so powerful that the ability for Klal Yisrael to enable themselves to be drenched and soaked with Birchas Koyanim, you have to be a keli. You can't take a cup this size and take a 2-gallon pitcher and pour non-stop. You have to stop at a time or it'll overflow. That is what the Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid said about Birchas Koyanim. In Chutz La'aretz, the power of Birchas Koyanim and duchening is so immense and overpowering that you shouldn't do it in Chutz La'aretz, because it like breaks the keli. It's too powerful for it to hold. But he kept it for Yom Tiv, that we shouldn't forget about the inyan of Birchas Kohanim, and that's why Kohanim still will duchen on Yom Tiv in Musaf. And as the Talmud Muvik of the Ramah said, that we don't do it by Shachris because people are still worrying about their parnasa. They're walking to shul on Yom Tiv, and they're thinking about their geschäft and what they have to do and what they could improve. These thoughts come in because the average person puts so much of his emunah into what he's doing. I have to do this in my business so I could make more. I have to do this and that so I shouldn't lose more. That he's always thinking about what he could do and what he should do. This lessens the power, and that's why he says we don't duchen by Shachris, but we only do it by Musaf. So the Talmidim asked him that if that's the case, then why do we even do it by Musaf? Because maybe he's busy worrying about Parnasa. And he answered and said, no, then the people are already besimcha because they're thinking about the basar v'yayin, the meat and the wine that they're going to partake in because it's Yom Tov. So they're in the realm of simcha, and that's when we could duchen on Yom Tov. Now, our Sedra is full of the inyan of Shemitah and Yovel. Shemitah, you know, was 6 years they worked the lands, and on the 7th year it was like Shabbos. rested. No plowing, no seeding, no pruning, no harvesting, nothing. And after 7 of those Shemitas, 7 times 7, we ushered in what's called Yovel. And Yovel had its own distinct halachas. We had to, if a person sold 10 houses, he was in the real estate business, and he owned 10 houses. And during the years leading up to Yovel, he sold, he got the money, but when it came Yovel, he had to give back the houses. So people really knew that I'm only buying this house until Yovel. So if Yovel is in 6 years, I have to make a calculation of how much it's worth for these 6 years. And if it was 47 years later, it was a different calculation. And there was Shiluach Avodim, that a person had a household with 10 workers, and now he was reminded that next year is going to be Yovel. All those workers go free. You had free labor. Imagine in your businesses, if you had 6 workers, 60 workers, and there was no payroll. You had to feed them, you had to make sure that they had proper clothing, proper sleeping quarters, but you didn't have to pay payroll. And then you're told you have to, starting next year, you have to hire others to fill in these free positions. So the point I want to bring out to you is that we know that Rosh Hashanah is a day of din. You're decided how your health is going to be the whole year. It's decided how much nachas you're going to have from the children. It's decided how much parnasa you're going to have. That's Rosh Hashanah. But Yom Kippur is not Yom Hadin. It's a serious day, but it's a day of cleansing, of tahara. We're dressed in white to represent the Chut Hashani, the red thread that turned white. We want the white, which represents the tahara. And we want the slicha, the mechila, and the kapara. We come out cleansed, we come out clean. But it's not Yom Hadin. And many Sfarim refer to Yom Kippur as a Yom HaChesed, because we're given a free ticket for Yom Kippur. But when it came Yovel, an interesting thing, and this the Chinuch says, and don't mix up the Chinuch with the Minchas Chinuch. The Minchas Chinuch lived like 150 years ago. The Chinuch was a Rishon and lived 750 years ago. So that Chinuch says that on Rosh Hashanah we know we have Malchios, Zichronos, and Shofros. And we sound the shofar throughout the Musaf, Shmona Esrei. On Yom Kippur, we don't do such a thing. The only sound of the shofar is Motzoi Yom Kippur, which has nothing to do with the mitzvah of shofar. That shofar represents that just like the Avodim went out free that day, that night, we are Avodim to all of the Chatoim, the Taivas that we do this, and we all the Lashon Hara, and we're going out Motzoi Yom Kippur free, like the Avodim go out from their slavery. We go out, and that's the Tekiah Shofar. But there is an exception. When it's if on Yovel we say Shemona Esrei, we say just like the Shemona Esrei on Rosh Hashanah, Malchios, Zechronos, and Shofros on Yom Kippur. And we sound the shofar throughout the Shemona Esrei. We do all of those things. And the Chinuch asks a question: why? All the other, like on the other years of Yovel, we don't do it. But when it comes Geula, or it comes the specialness and the uniqueness of Geula Shlema, we're going to do it, and they did it in the Beis Hamikdash. So why would we bring Rosh Hashanah Hanhaga into Yom Kippur? And the Chinuch says an interesting thing, because she'ein davar shemachzik adam or mechazek adam kemo masa rabim. Because when you tell a person, oh, do you know that Yovel's coming and all your avodim are leaving and they're going home, and that they're going home, what, I'm losing all my tax-free, salary-free avodim, my workers? And he would fall despondent, says the Chinuch. He's coming into a terrible financial loss. So the Chinuch says that just like Rosh Hashanah, we are a Klal Yisrael trembling together with the Midas Hadin of what's going to be that year, that when we remind ourselves that all of the avodim are going to be freed, so your next door neighbor is losing his workers, the other side of your house, they're losing their work, all the businesses in your building are losing their workers, says the Chinuch, Tsaras derabim chatzi nechama. The fact that in and of itself provides the consolation and the detailed upgrade of people's feelings and their concern when they realize it's not them alone. It's not they alone. It is everyone. And that's a very mudnam thing, because if I'm losing my 12 workers, how do I feel better that my next door neighbor is losing his 20 workers? But that is part, says the Chinuch, part and parcel of human nature. That when you are singled out for loss and difficulty, that you are consoled by human nature when you see it's happening to each and every other family, business person in the process than going it alone. So that's part of the concept of Nichum Avelim. Now the person coming to you is not an oval, but he has a mitzvah, because when he comes to be Menachem Oval, he is thinking as he's entering that house, what can I say to uplift the spirit of the Oval I'm coming to visit? What difference does it make? And as somebody once said, the Lubavitcher Rebbe had spoken about Yemos HaMashiach and Tchias HaMesim, and he said said that it'll be pretty immediate right after Mashiach comes. And people said to him, somebody wrote him a letter and said, but the Arizal says it's not going to be for 8 years after Mashiach comes, and Tchias HaMesim will not be for 24 years. And even in one place he writes 40 years. So the Rebbe answered and said, you are correct with what you quoted the Arizal, but you should know today the Arizal admits and agrees that it's not going to be 8 years, 24 years, or 40, because what Klal Yisrael had to go through in these 450 years since he lived, that no one is going to have to wait 8 or 24 or 40. But Mashiach will come, the tzaddikim will stand up right away, and right after that the people. Now I know there are many contradictions, because the Arizal himself says that before Mashiach comes, most people living in that tekufa are going to be Gilgulim, resurrected, that they're going to be people who lived before, and there was some problem with what they lived their lives, and they had to come back and live another life. The problem is we're not told what the problem is. And a person has to hope that if he lives an Erlich life, he's going to pull through, that he's Mesaken, he fixed what he came back for. But the Arizal says that most people at the time of Mashiach will have been 12 different people. Most. Tzaddikim Gemurim, like the big tzaddikim, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Barditchev, the Baal Shem, these are tzaddikim that never lived before. They were brand new neshamas, and of course they have no Gilgulim, they never had to be a Gilgul. But for the Amcha, for the multitudes, and the Arizal says that if by the 12th time he didn't fix it up, he doesn't stand up by Mashiach. So that's a contradiction, because there were many tzaddikim who said, Ki lo yidach mimenu nidach, that every Yid is going to stand up if he was born a Yid, no matter how many averis, no matter how many difficulties in life, no matter how many shortcomings, he will stand up. And as a matter of fact, in our Sedra, when it says that es kaspecho lo sitein lo beneshech, and the pasuk ends, Ani Hashem Elokeichem asher hotzei eschem me'eretz Mitzrayim lios lochem lelokim. It says that in 3 places. Now this pasuk is talking largely about ribbis. If a person, the Chazal say, that if a person lends money and he takes interest, he doesn't stand up, the Gemara says, he does not stand up to Tchias HaMesim. Because what is really ribbis? One guy has money, and a guy comes to him who's desperate. He can't pay his rent. He can't pay his mortgage. He's going to lose his house. He's desperate. And he needs the money, so he's ready to pay whatever the lender wants, no matter how high the terms are, because he needs the money. So you took a Yid when the blood was coming out of his mouth, his nose, and the Cherev Chada was munachas al Gabbai tzavaro, and you took advantage of him. And when you're going to need the chesed v'rachmim, it won't be there for you. But according to many tzaddikim, no matter what he did or didn't do, he is going to stand up by Tchias HaMesim. And we know Izevel, that they dragged her bones in the street, Achav and Izevel, the Rishoim. And it says in Chazal, clearly because of what they did with the ribbis, with the interest. And even though today there is, of course, from Hillel, he saw people couldn't buy food, they couldn't do business, so he was masakin the Indian of Prusbel, that a person could lend, and it wasn't called a loan, it was some manufactured arrangement that he was just a partner in the money giving over, which is being used for his business to survive. So it's mutter. In other words, a person who has a prusbel is allowed to, and that the debt was not bottle when it came shavias, became shmita. So he protected the lender, and this way made available to the borrower money that he desperately needed. But there are many people today who refuse to do this prusbel. I mean, they don't, chas v'sholom, lend on interest without some sort of heter iska. Otherwise, they're both over an isser diaraisa of the lender and the borrower. For every dollar without a heter iska is over a isser diaraisa. And you see how Chazal, they don't say somebody that was a Machal Shabbos doesn't stand up to Tchias HaMesim, or somebody who eats treif his whole life doesn't stand up, but someone who lends with interest does. So the Medrash cites this, why does, it asks, the pasuk end, and it says the same thing in two other cases. It says the Inyan, and don't lend on interest, and don't pressure, and don't. And then it says, Ani Hashem Elkeichem asher hotzeisi eschem me'eretz Mitzrayim. What does that have to do with interest? The fact that we left Mitzrayim, and that we became a people to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in two other mitzvahs in the Torah, it ends off after stating the Inyan, Ani Hashem Elokeichem asher hotzeisi. So there's three things. There's the interest issue. And if someone, the Gemara says, sells fake tcheles tzitzis, that from a tree, koloi elon, produced something that looked exactly like tcheles. We know that v'hoya lochem letzitzis, that there's an inyan of tcheles, hakon of psil tcheles, and for all of the years we never knew exactly which was the worm that had that specific ingredient of tcheles. So we today wear tzitzis without tcheles. And Klal Yisrael has been doing it for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. But by that inyan, it ends off asher hotzeisi eschem me'eretz Mitzrayim. And then by moiznei tzedek, which means scales. That means if you want to be an honest grocery man and you weigh your fares, you have to make sure that you're not tipping the scale even 1%. Because those who put salt at one end of the scale, you couldn't tell that it was tipping in one direction or the other. So it made no difference, but it was totally fake. It was cheating the person. So in those three cases, the pasuk ends, Asher hotzeisi eschem me'eretz Mitzrayim. And the Medrash says, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu said in Mitzrayim, Don't think the final makkah of makas bechoros that someone's going to hide and think, oh, I'm in hiding. The Ribono Shel Olam's never going to find me. But you should know anyone who is a bechor and has to die is going to die. Anyone who is not a bechor, whether you're out in the open, you will not die. So just like I know what's doing in the hidden chambers and in the secret hiding places, what's doing by Makas Bechoros, the Medrash says this. By these three places, I want you to remember that when you lend interest, don't come, and the Medrash gives this example, don't come to the other Yid and say, oh, I would never charge you interest. But this money is really a goy's money, and I'm just acting as a go-between, a shadchan, a goodwill ambassador. Because I know, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whose money it is. I don't care what you tell the other person. The goy's money, not the goy. Just like Ani Hashem Elokechem me'eretz Mitzrayim, that the Bechorim could not hide from me. And by Moiznei Tzedek, and by tzitzis of tcheles, that many used to take from the klo'ei elon, the purple dye, and claim it was tcheles, but I know if it is or it isn't, and if you're cheating or not. So the underlying and underscored issue was honesty. That in the realm of honesty, we can cheat, we can lie. It never helps. And by the way, I remember, and I once said, I don't know if I said in the last 10 years, but I know at one point I did say it. Somebody was bragging to me that they were able to make $2,600. That was the amount he said. That something had occurred and he was able to claim from the insurance company, and it was a lie. He was able to claim an extra for some item that was stolen or lost, $2,600. When he said it to me, I thought, you're never going to gain by it, but I didn't say any musar, and I heard what he said, and that man 6 months later, and this is a true story, had an item of jewelry that was stolen. One item was stolen. All the other jewelry they left. And I asked him, how much was that piece of jewelry worth? And he said $2,600. Because on Rosh Hashanah, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu says this year you're going to make $230,000, that's what you're going to make. There's one time when a person pravas the Seder, that's why it says that on Pesach we are nidoinin, we are judged on Tvua, which means Parnasa. What do you mean you're judged on how much Parnasa? That's Rosh Hashanah, when you're judged on how much Parnasa. But the answer is that a person could adjust the amount of Rosh Hashanah on Pesach by the Seder, lefi the Chumrah and the Hiddur of what he does Leil Seder. And that's why the Mishnah says that nidoinin ala tvua, you are judged on how much Parnasa you're going to have on Pesach, because there's an opportunity to adjust the amount of what you're getting and what you're going to end up having. But basically, a person has to be a maimon. You have to work. You can't sit on a hammock drinking an iced tea. Oh, well, everything is basher, so I'm sitting here and I'll just drink the tea, and the Ribono Shel Olam is going to send me what I'm going to have. The truth is, this is the Olam HaMaisa, and he has to work, he has to put forth the avodah. No one is Reb Shimon Bar Yochai except for tzaddikim. And we see that tzaddikim, they didn't have to work. That they were able, tzaddikim, the Hasidim give in maimed a certain amount of money each month, $10, $100, $1,000, whatever they give for the Rebbe's livelihood. And he doesn't have to work. Zacha, Melachto nasa al yedei acherim, and in lo zacha, you're going to have to work your head off. But for the hamon and the average person, we have to work and we have to put our right foot forward to be able to erlich, and whatever was decreed for us, we're not going to adjust it, and we're not going to outsmart Shamayim by putting in false insurance claims, thinking that we're gaining like a chacham, like a wise guy, extra money that he never ever would have received. Then he gets the piece of jewelry stolen, and he loses it that way. Now, one of the brachas in the Sipurna talks about it says v'chisomar manochal bashana hashviyas. That means if you can't work, how are you going to live? Your whole livelihood is from your field. And the tzivui was to just leave it alone. So the pasuk says there's going to be a bracha for 3 years. You'll have the year before for the next year, and that year, and the year after, because it produces on the 8th year. So Rashi brings the Chazal that if you ask what's going to be with Parnasa, so you're told that va'achaltem lachmechem lesoiva, you keep the halachas, and Rashi says, what does that mean? That you're going to eat your bread and you're going to be filled? That oichel kima, you'll be eating less, but umisborach b'me'ov, but your stomach, you're going to feel satiated. You're going to feel full. You go into a koilel of aniyim. I'm not talking about koilel Yungalite, whose father has $10 million, so anytime he needs $10,000, he just asks his father and he has it. But I'm talking about many who are really moiser nefesh, that they have to consider how much milk for their children they're buying and what's going on. So the Rashi brings the Chazal that he's going to eat a little, but he's going to feel full. That's the bracha. And the Sipurna points out that when someone asks a question, what are we going to be eating? He's the guy that's answered that you're going to v'achaltem lachmechem lesoiva, because he needs an answer because he asked a question. But the guy who has emunah and doesn't ask the question, he doesn't have to v'achaltem lachmechem lesoiva, that you're going to eat a little and then you're going to get the big bracha. You're going to get the big bracha without even asking the question. So says the Sipurna. Take a look into the Sipurna. So we have to know that it's a parsha of emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and this whole Shemitah and Yovel is one big test for Klal Yisrael. And you see in Eretz Yisrael today, those that keep Shemitah. One year there was a group when they were doing well, that they got together and they said, well, how much do the farmers in Eretz Yisrael need to be able to have parnasa? So they added up. This guy spends every year $80,000 for his parnasa. This guy spends $160,000. And they added up the number and it came out 26 million. And I remember very clearly that the Gevirim in America and some in Europe put together the 26 million and handed it to every farmer in Eretz Yisrael. And every year they had some twist that the money came in and they had full parnasa. So we see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we don't have to see it, we know it. that there is this dynamic bracha that comes to a yid that is very careful with standing strong and is zoicha to the level of emunah, because we fight our whole lives to get to that level of emunah. You know, it's easy to say, or a guy that's got the 10 million, as I said, in the bank, to be a maimin. But the guy who has to really worry about paying every month his gas bill, but he davens with a minyan every single day, never misses, and he's learning, and when he opens that Gemara, he thinks from it, Rabbanu Shalom, this is on a silver platter for you to have a nachas ruach, that is the difference in our lifetime, and that translates into Yiras Shamayim, because a person who's a real maimin has Yiras Shamayim. If someone doesn't have Yiras Shamayim, there's no problem of cheating somebody and doing all this. He doesn't have the Yiras Shamayim. So what Hashem's going to look at him or not look at him doesn't mean very much, and it doesn't mean in actuality what he's going to lead his life with or not. Now, we mentioned before Tchias HaMesim. I just want to say to you that Rabbi Akiva Eiger, who was the Rav, the famous Rav in Posen, and I opened with a vort from the Rokeach about Duchening and Birchas Koyanim. Somebody went up to him once and said, I was a sandik many times, and it says in Chazal that the biggest segula to get rich is to be a sandik. And I was a sandik many times, and it never happened. So that Rabbi Akiva answered him and said, when it says that you will become a gevir, it means if you're a sandik me'umid and a sandik miyoshev. That means there's two sandiks at a bris. One is holding the baby sitting at the time of the bris. When the bris is over, they give over the baby to somebody who was the sandik me'umid. He's holding the baby while somebody else gives the name and says the brachas for the baby. So the Rabbi Akiva Eiger said, when it says that you're a sandik and you'll become rich, it's if you are both sandik me'umid and sandik miyoshev. Now, many do not hold like that. And even in the letter from the Noida B'Yehuda to that Kehila, that the Chassam Sofer, who lived at the same time, wrote him a very sharp letter. How could you write this? And the Noida B'Yehuda at his time was considered the Posek Hador. People wrote him a shaila that sometimes took 6 weeks by boat to get him the shaila, but they wanted to know what he said, because he was like the Posek Hador. He was the biggest. But the Chassam Sofer was no baby. The Chassam Sofer was in that same realm. And he protested many of the Piskei Halacha of the Noida B'Yehuda. But anyway, the Rabbi Akiva Eiger, they once brought him a shaila. The town, the Chever Kadisha, set the fee for a person who wanted to buy a plot. Now, some bought, they say it's a segula for Arichas Yomim to buy a plot while you're still alive. But whether you buy before or after, it was the Chever Kadisha who set the amount that was to be paid. And there was a very big gevir who was very stingy. And Oni came to him, instead of giving him the $20 bill like he should have, lefi his richness, he gave him a $1 bill. So when he died, the Chever Kadisha said that they wanted a tremendous sum. Let's say if they charged everybody $1,000 for a plot, they charged $50,000 for this gevir. So the family went to Rabbi Akiva Eger and complained. They said, listen, we're ready to pay the regular fair price, but why are they, just because we're rich, are they insisting? So the Rabbi Akiva Eger answered and said that the Gemara says that in other words, we hope that every person in a grave is going to stand up almost immediately by Tchias HaMesim. So we charge less the Chevra Kadisha because they're only going to be there temporarily, a short time. But this Gevir who made all of his money on interest, the Gemara says they're not going to stand up by Tchias HaMesim. So he's going to be there for a very long time in the grave. So the Chevra Kadisha is right to charge. Let's hope it's not so, that Klal Yisrael suffered enough and went through enough. And just like Eliyahu Hanavi will answer all the kashas and all the everything, he'll answer that Gemara also in explaining why the person who did make his livelihood with interest got up by Tchias HaMesim. No one wishes anyone not to stand up by Tchias HaMesim. And the last word that I want to share with you is there are two places in the Torah that we have tochacha. One place is in Devarim, in Parshas Kisavo, but the real, that's Mishnah Torah, it's like a repetition, but the real yesod of tochacha is our Sedra, is Bechukosai. And one of the psukim says that when you're bad, V'sam lorik kochachem, that your koiches are going to be for nothing. Now the question is asked, Rabbeinu Tam, that every 11, 12-year-old kid that begins learning Tosfos, on every page of every Gemara, the name Rabbeinu Tam is mentioned. That was not his name. His name was Rabbeinu Yaakov. So why in every Tosfos did it say, Oimer Rabbeinu Tam, who, by the way, he was a grandson of Rashi. The Balei Tosfos were grandchildren of Rashi. So they lived like 1,000 years ago, these Balei Tosfos. And a group of people came to Rabbeinu Yaakov, Rabbeinu Tam, who we call Rabbeinu Tam, but his real name was Rabbeinu Yaakov, and told him that we have a problem by Klal Yisrael that we are choking to death. What was the problem? In those days, it was not uncommon for young girls who got married at 18, 19, 12, whatever their age was, to die. They had all this diphtheria and tuberculosis, all these terrible diseases that today, Baruch Hashem, we have vaccines, we have different things. I'm not talking about COVID and the vaccines. I was together with many of the opinion not to take these vaccines, and no one in my family ever took such a vaccine because we thought it was all a hoax with this Fauci and with all that business. But there were no vaccines. There was no way of protecting oneself. B'derech v'rapo yirape, that doctors and medicine produce some things that help people tremendously. 80% up until 1930 died with diabetes. Today, a person's living 100 years with diabetes. They're able to, through the renewed and improved vaccines and medicines, insulin, all these things. So they came to Rabbeinu Tam and said that a father who doesn't have money has to start collecting for his daughter who's going to get married in 18 years, money so that he could marry her off, because he had to come up with money. The boy wanted to be able to either continue learning or to have support, to be able to pay for a wedding, to be able... Money was unfortunately involved, and it was a very important component in the lives of Yidden in Europe and in Russia. Now, they said to Rabbeinu Tam that many girls are dying. They get engaged, they get married, and at 22 they're dying, at 24. And now the father has to go out and collect for the next daughter. So he made a takana that anyone who got a chunk of money, if the daughter died within 2 years or 3 years of the marriage, the chassan had to give back the money to the father. And it saved people, for they were going crazy. They couldn't, these were poor people fighting for life, just bread and water, bread and milk and whatever. And now the daughter died Nebuch lo aleinu lo aleichem 1,000 times, and it wasn't 1 in 10,000. It was 5 in 100. It was 10 in 100, and people were suffering. So Rabbeinu Tam said, if they don't give back the money, then the curse of the tochacha, Visam lorik kochachem, is going to kick in with the person, and he'll be working for nothing. The word Visam is Tam, Rabbeinu Tam. That is how he got his name, and that's how he is referred to in Tosfos. And we call him, the world calls him Rabbeinu Tam, because of the schus of saving so many families from a killer existence and suffering, what they had to go through. He saved them. The Rabbanu Shalom should help each and every one of us, as we say the Chazak Chazak v'nis Chazek, uplift and heal, uplift and give the parnasa, uphill and give the children that people are dying for and davening for, uphill and give not only the children but nachas from the children. That in every family, Nebuch, there's trouble, and no one is exempt from it. You know, poor people think, oh, if I just had the money, there's no problem in the world, no problem. And then you take a Gevir who has no problem with money, and look at what's going on with his health or with his children. There's something Nebuch there. And people who learn Torah Lishma and their kids are in Koil, they can get away without these problems and have good children and have a house that's L'Shem Shamayim, and that has a house that's so decorated with Divrei Torah and Oineg Shabbos that the 2 Malachei Ashoris that escort the person to his house from Shul. And like the Gemara says, 1 Malach is good, 1 Malach is bad. And if the house is ready for Shabbos and adorned with Shabbos, the bad Malach is forced to say that halavai, this family should have again a Shabbos of Oneg Shabbos next week. And if Chas v'Shalom, they come home and there's Chilul Shabbos and they're sitting eating tuna fish sandwiches and reading newspapers and things like that, then the good Malach is forced to say that next Shabbos, that's what will happen again with this family. That Nebuch, there's no bracha. So we hope that we will rise up to the occasion and help have our chelik in the Geula Shalema by making HaKadosh Baruch Hu happy and happier. Bracha v'hatzlacha.